The warder hurried to open the gate, and Neville Hammersmith stepped into the courtyard of HM Prison Bridewell. He stood and waited as the gate was closed behind him and then shook hands with the warder. "Morning, Bill," he said. "I appreciate this."
"Of course," Bill said. "I still owe you. Just keep it quiet. Don't want to lose my position."
He jerked his head at the high stone walls behind them and led the way up the winding path and through a thick iron door. It, too, closed behind Hammersmith, who breathed in the cool, dry air and stuck his hands in his pockets. He was wearing a thin black overcoat with an unfashionably large collar and cotton trousers that were a bit too short. His shoes were scratched and worn, buffed to a blue sheen around the heels, but dirty grey at the toes. His mop of uncombed hair fell into his eyes, but he hardly seemed to notice. The warder glanced up at him and motioned for Hammersmith to turn and follow a wide hall around the corner. The walls were thick and soundproof to increase the prisoner's sense of isolation, to impress upon the men a need for contemplation and regard. One wing of the prison had been destroyed by a runaway locomotive and was being rebuilt. Hammersmith could hear the men working, their voices echoing faintly down the halls. They walked silently through a large room filled with battered wooden tables and chairs, through several more doors, and finally stopped outside a cell at the end of a long corridor. "He's in there, on the floor at the back." Hammersmith looked up and down the empty hall and stepped inside the cell. He waited for his eyes to adjust to the dim light from a high window, barely 4 inches across and 5 feet off the ground, through which a pale shaft of light shone. Against the wall to Hammersmith's left hand was a narrow cot, metal slats with a hard straw mat and a blanket. The only other furnishing was a wooden bucket on the floor in the far corner. Hammersmith didn't need to be told what the bucket was for. A man's naked body lay across the cot, his knees on the floor and his arms stretched out so that his knuckles touched the wall behind the slats. His face was buried in the grey blanket. 3 of his toes had been broken and were splayed out at different angles. Something glinted in the dim light, and Hammersmith narrowed his eyes, saw a pair of spectacles in the dark at the intersection of the wall and the floor beneath the cot. "You're sure it's him?"
"It's him," Bill said. "It's Adrian March, all right."
March had been Walter Day's mentor, had introduced him to the yard and got him his position as an inspector. But Adrian March had also belonged to a secret society of torturers and murderers. Day had been forced to arrest his mentor, his old friend. Hammersmith suspected that Day was still punishing himself for what he had been forced to do. Did he fall?
"Roll him over, you'll see."
"What will I see?"
"His tongue."
"Nothing else? Only his tongue?"
"It were enough. He choked on it."
"Self-inflicted?"
"Not judging by the expression on his face, it weren't. He saw something bad, something that frightened him. My guess, whoever or whatever that was, that's what killed him."
Hammersmith winced and looked away from the body. Across from the cot on the opposite wall was an odd configuration of blue lines on the stone. Hammersmith stared at the lines until they made sense to him, formed a symbol he'd seen before, a faint chalk outline in the shape of a circle. Under the circle was a crude arrow that pointed down, a giant number 0 pointing roughly in the direction of Adrian March's body. Hammersmith drew in a quick involuntary breath and turned to the warder. "He wasn't cut?"
"Not a bit," Bill said. "Someone came in here while I was at my meal and shoved his tongue down his throat. Didn't touch one other hair on his head, and left again before I returned, like a ghost."
"Very much like a ghost."
"You think it was one, an actual ghost?"
"I think it was someone most people think is dead and gone. Better he should have stayed that way."
"Whoever it was, it looks to me like Inspector March put up a fight. You can see he thrashed around some, maybe while he was choking, maybe before that. Broke his toes and one of his fingers. You can't see the finger from here, it's around the other..."